So, like I said, most people thought the world was round. Uh, that was well known since the Greek times when the Greek mathematicians correctly calculated the circumference of the world. So, or pretty closely correct calculated the circumference of the world to a high degree of accuracy. So during the Middle Ages, those ancient texts were read and studied, and so most educated people were well aware that the world was spherical. It doesn't take a genius to get to climb a mountain and see that the world has kind of a curvature. So only idiots thought the world was flat, even though there's this kind of popular notion that people thought the world was flat, and you might recognize something like this.
Round, lad, round, lad, round, lad, round. Columbo, the world she's flat. The world she's around. She's flat. Look, King, she's around like the apple. She's flat like the pancake. Pasta fazool. She's around, she's a firm, she's a fully packed. She's around like my head. She's flat like your head. A biscuit tortoni. Yeah. What's up, docs? I'm a disgust. Nobody believes that the world that she's around. Yeah, she looks around to me, Doc.
Oh, boys, come here.
Queen Isabella.
If you can prove the world is round, Chris, I'll give you my jewels.
Ravioli. All the time prove. Approve a schmoove. She's around. Don't let your spaghetti boil over, Chris. I'll prove it for you. How you gonna prove? I'll show you.
So you might have seen something like that. That that perpetuated this idea that somehow people in the 15th century thought the world was flat, but that's ridiculous. The king and queen of Spain would have been educated by very good private tutors, and they would not have believed the world was flat. That's absurd. But for some reason, we like to think that Christopher Columbus was one of the few people who had this idea. No, he actually was within consensus that the world was round, where Columbus differed from general consensus of geographers was how large the world actually was. He thought the circumference of the world was much smaller than the Greeks had theorized. So Columbus tried to make the argument to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who were now jointly the monarchs of Spain, recently flush with their victories over the Moors. Columbus tried to make the argument to them that the world was much smaller than the Greeks thought, and so if he simply sailed straight west, he would make it to China very quickly, and this would circumvent the Portuguese control over the trade routes along the coast of Africa. So Columbus was convinced that the world was smaller than most people thought, and the route to Asia was quite easy. just sailing west. So he lobbied governments around Europe with this idea. He went to Portugal, he went to Italy, he went to France, he went to England, and all these governments refused to finance his expedition. In Spain, he succeeded. The Spanish government was willing to take a risk on him and give him three caravels, three older caravels, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And his payment in return for using Spanish ships would be 10% of or would be 90% of whatever he found. So 90% of whatever he found would go back to the King and Queen of Spain, and 10% would stay with him. So Columbus would keep 10% of whatever he traded for in Asia. So he set off in the late summer of 1492, narrowly avoiding a mutiny among his crew. By the early fall of 1492, and did find land. He landed in what was probably Watling's Island here. So what Columbus discovered there were what he thought were some kinds of Asians. He thought that there were some kind of Indians there, and so he named the people Indios, thinking that they were people who lived on some island off the coast of Asia. So he captured a few of the Tainos who lived in this territory and brought them back to Spain, as well as a number of the goods that he discovered. When he got back to Spain, he was a hero among the Spanish. It was a lot of people thought he went out to die, and instead he comes back saying that he's discovered these Asian territories and discovered the quick route to Asia. He was convinced till the end of his life he had discovered Asia. So thanks to the printing press, which was relatively new within a few decades at this time in 1493, news of the discovery spread quickly. And so there started a kind of arms race of exploration between Spain and Portugal and the rest of Europe, really, over who would be able to exploit the new discoveries. Portugal, in particular, was determined that Spain wouldn't have access to whatever these new discoveries were, and so it looked like Spain and Portugal were going to go to war. The church in Rome worked out a compromise, and they drew an imaginary line north and south on the globe that stipulated that Spain's sphere of exploration would be west of this line, and Portugal's sphere of exploration would be east of this line. It was called the Treaty of Tordesillas, which the line is about here. And that meant that Portugal got access to exploration of what's now Brazil, as well as the African coast, and Spain got access to exploration of this territory further westward. So Columbus returned in 1493 to the area that he had discovered in 1492 and took with him 17 ships, a lot of livestock, and over 1,000 men. So he went back with a very large expeditionary force financed by the King and Queen of Spain, and he was empowered by the king and queen to treat the natives very well, he was told, and also empowered to claim whatever he could for the monarchy of Spain. So Columbus went back to the territory that he had initially discovered, what's now the Haiti and Dominican Republic, and what he found was that the crew members he had left there the year before had engaged in robberies of native villages, had raped the native women, and engaged in all kinds of brutality against the natives. And so they had essentially fought a war against the natives while he was gone. And Columbus, in response to that, decided to engage in more attacks against the natives. So Columbus attacked 10 native villages during the second expedition to the Caribbean, and took 550 of them into captivity and then sold them into slavery. Twice more Columbus returned uh, in the 1490s, and then once again in 1502 through 1504. The entire period was kind of a debacle for Columbus. His first expedition was an unqualified success. He went back to Spain. The Spanish monarchy gave him a noble title, uh, christened him the Admiral of the Ocean Seas, and gave him, or continued his 10% privilege to all the goods that came from the New World. So Columbus became very wealthy very rapidly since he had 10% of everything that was out there. But on his third voyage, he was such a poor administrator, and there were so many complaints about his handling of the expeditions that his own crewmen captured him and put him in chains and then sent him back to Spain in disgrace. So after that episode, he was stripped of his noble titles, and his entitlement was reduced from 10% to 1%. There's this notion that Columbus died poor and in disgrace. He did die in disgrace. He was embarrassed that he never found Asia, and he was sure he had found Asia, even though other geographers by the early 1500s were quite confident that what Columbus had discovered was not Asia, that these were undiscovered continents. Columbus, though, remained unconvinced. He always thought he discovered Asia, and never accepted that it wasn't Asia. His fourth voyage was his final attempt to search for the route to China, which failed. He then returned to Spain late in his life in 1505 to try to restore his titles. He never did restore them, and so he died kind of humiliated, unwilling to admit that he had not discovered a route to Asia. So the whole debacle with his legal wrangling helped turn the geographic community against him, and so they didn't even name the continents that he had discovered after him. They named them after this Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci, who mapped some of South America in 1499. So poor Columbus, he was such a poor administrator, he didn't even get the continents named after him that he discovered. So Amerigo Vespucci was the one to say that this was a new world, that these were indeed undiscovered continents. He was one of the early geographers to say that.